Nowadays in gaming, we don't get many Western style type of games, and the main ones that everyone plays are Red Dead, which makes sense. However, Red Dead Revolver is a game that not many seem to mention when talking about the cowboy games. I missed out on this during the PlayStation 2 generation, so I decided to give this game a try, and see how the first entry in the Red Dead series holds up 20 years later. Let's start with the most memorable part of the game, the gameplay. Unlike any westerns that came before it, Red Dead Revolver made the leap and gave us authentic cowboy-like gameplay while still having that typical Rockstar type of feel. It's apparent right from the opening chapter when you're completing the tutorial of how this game is going to play. Since you're in a third-person perspective, you see everything in front of you, and it makes it really easy to aim your guns at any enemy. You just press a button, the reticle appears, and then you aim and shoot. Simple stuff. However, actually performing this in real time is a lot harder than it appears. The majority of the time, the enemies are constantly moving all over the place, making it really hard to accurately aim. And by moving, I don't just mean jogging from one spot to another. I mean these guys are literally shifting left and right so fast it's like they're using Ultra Instinct. It's not bad enough that you need automatic targeting, but when you're surrounded by enemies and you can't accurately shoot a single target, things get pretty annoying. To make things worse, the enemies are shooting at you at the same time, so as you miss shots, more than likely they're not missing and you're going to take some big damage. I think if the enemies didn't move so fast from one piece of cover to the next, it would be a lot easier to aim and take them out. Speaking of the aiming, this brings me to the Deadeye system.
What the hell are you looking at? Fill 'em full of lead.
Even all these years ago, the Deadeye system still feels great to use. Slowing down time and being able to pick apart each enemy is too much fun. I like how in this game the bars in the bottom left corner fill up pretty fast from killing enemies, so once you use Deadeye, it doesn't take long for you to be able to use it again. Although sometimes the targeting wasn't as consistent as it should have been. There was many times where I would try to aim and the targets wouldn't appear over the enemy even though I scrolled over different body parts. This wasn't every time, but when you don't have much Deadeye left, you need to make every second count. Deadeye really shows its colors when you're using the stronger weapons or guns that have lots of bullets. Like when you have a shotgun, it only takes like 2 or 3 shots in order to kill an enemy. Do that for multiple enemies and you can just breeze right through many of the combat encounters. I thought what was really helpful was being able to target enemies from far distances. There's a bunch of times where the enemies are far away and you'll find yourself with a full Deadeye, needing to make a shot from a good distance back. So using a rifle and one-shotting their head always feels rewarding. I think the weapon variety makes a big difference when going through each mission because the weapons are all very similar but different at the same time. As expected, most of the guns you use are pistols and revolvers, but you're also given rifles, shotguns, and throwables to use as well. To make things even cooler, you have the option to set up your loadout before starting a chapter. So if you like a certain revolver but you want to use a shotgun and dynamite too, you can just equip them before you start the level and they'll be available for use. Understanding the stats of each gun makes this choice a lot harder than you might think. Many of these have the right balance of stats that make it hard to choose one over the other. Like one pistol will have higher damage than a revolver, but its reload time is slower than the revolver, creating a sort of conundrum where you're forced to choose between each weapon and which stat you care about the most. This applies to every weapon, but even if you choose wrong, you always have the option to restart the level and switch your loadout to something different. Now you may be wondering, how do we actually acquire these weapons? Well, that's simple, as you have access to a sort of store in between the missions where you can spend the money you earn from those missions on a variety of items. These can be new guns or goods that unlock journal pages or showdown stages and characters. But in regards to the weapons, once you buy one, it gets added to your inventory and you can just scroll through your guns until you find the one that you want. At first, it seems like you won't amass that much money, but by the time you hit the latter stages of the game, you'll definitely have enough to buy just about anything. This brings me to the thing that I didn't like the most about this game, the functionality of the gameplay itself.
Hey there! You going to Brimstone?
Close enough, I suppose. The express road passes about a mile outside of town.
Well, I gotta get to the governor so he can call out the troops. There's trouble heading from down south.
Well, climb on back, soldier.
The level design of this game is great, as you play with different characters over the course of each mission, and what you're doing in those missions is always fun. But what I hated was how it was all structured. To start with, as you would expect, you kill a whole bunch of enemies within each mission. As it's a western, that's almost guaranteed. But the problem lies in the sheer amount of enemies you face versus how many health drops you get. When you kill an enemy, almost every time they drop some sort of ammo for a weapon. It could be pistol ammo, revolver ammo, shotgun ammo, pretty much anything. But when you kill someone, you're going to get something. However, what's not nearly as consistent are the health pickups. Sometimes when you shoot an enemy, you'll get one, but most of the time you don't. Making things worse, there aren't health pickups that you can find and grab when running around. So essentially, you have to not get hit. even though you're constantly bombarded by enemies. I didn't mind facing waves upon waves of outlaws, but you have got to give us enough health pickups to help us get through the level. But believe it or not, it gets even worse. Let's say you do actually kill all the enemies and get through a large section of the mission. You're then greeted with a boss with a large health bar that you have to kill in order to finish the level. They have their own attacks unique to the character and can inflict massive damage at a moment's notice. So if you barely survived the last section and were already low on health, now you face a boss which doesn't drop health pickups and you can't find any in the surrounding area, you're pretty much screwed. Rinse and repeat this scenario across multiple chapters and this game gets frustrating extremely fast. But somehow Rockstar decided that this wasn't enough and wanted to make this game even more annoying by adding in things you had to protect or missions with time limits. To explain, there's sections where you have to protect not only yourself, but allies or vehicles. The missions where you have allies by your side are the worst because they're supposed to help you kill enemies, but instead, they miss every shot and die very quickly. You might as well have stormtroopers next to you because they really are that bad. To get through these, you have to kill the enemies before they kill your allies. It's cool having other characters you played with alongside you for the actual missions, but they are absolutely no help whatsoever. Combine that with the sheer amount of enemies and these stages are almost impossible. And don't forget, there's still the bosses that are thrown in there that I mentioned earlier too. Another big mechanic that is used constantly are the duels. Similar to the Deadeye, the duels have you slowing down time, but with this you're put against another opponent and must shoot them before they shoot you. I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty bad at this. I'm not sure if it was because of how the reticles worked, but I died on these a lot. When starting out, you have to pull out your gun by tilting back on the analog stick, and then once your gun is out, you need to place targets all over the opponent to shoot them. But what took me forever to realize is that you don't want to just press the trigger button immediately and shoot them. You need to wait for the yellow reticle to turn red and then press the shoot button. This actually places a shot on the enemy, and when you do this multiple times in quick succession, you'll win the duel. This isn't hard fundamentally, but your opponents are faster than it seems and will kill you before you even have a chance to figure out where to place your shot. There isn't a way to skip these either, so your best bet is to just practice these and get good. The last thing I wanted to mention within the actual missions are the checkpoints. For the majority of these missions, once you die, you have to start from the very beginning and do the whole thing over. And this is consistent for the majority of the game, which just makes it even more important that you don't die. Sometimes you will get a checkpoint, but most of them are far and few in between. To me, it doesn't make any sense to not have a lot of checkpoints since you made it so hard to heal during the actual missions. Again, bringing me to the fact that this game has so many good elements, just most of it needed some work. Earlier I had mentioned that there's some things that you can spend your money on other than the weapons. These were the journals and showdowns. The journals provide you with a lot of additional information on the characters that made up the world of Red Dead Revolver. If you had a hard time understanding the story, or who is who, then these are a must read. They break down each person and give plenty of background information which makes it easy to understand their motives. You wouldn't think there would be too much of these entries, but there is a lot of information within this journal and a lot of things to unlock. Even if you buy a lot of items within the store during each level, I highly doubt you'll have everything in the journal unlocked on your first playthrough. The showdown was a cool way of implementing multiplayer into the game as there are a plethora of stages and characters that you can choose from. The stages are all areas that you play through during the main missions, and the characters are allies or enemies that you encounter during the story. At first it seems complex, but the whole premise of this multiplayer is actually really simple. Once the characters and stage are selected, you're placed into the area where you just run around and kill each other. But there's a little more to it. Once you kill another opponent, you receive a certain number of points, and sometimes that character will drop a card that will provide you with some sort of benefit. This could be added damage, another weapon, health, or something else, but grabbing these cards definitely give you an advantage. Keep killing your opponents, respawning, and collecting cards, and then whoever has the most points at the end of the game is the winner. A really simple game that seems more complicated than it actually is. Since I didn't play this on release, I'm unsure if you could have another player plug in their controller and run split screen matches, but I hope that was the case. This was a solid mode that offers a nice change up when you're sick of going through the hell that is the main missions. Even with all of that, what's more important is that it's clear that the foundation for the entire Red Dead series is apparent within this gameplay. The gun battles, level design, characters, all mimic what you would see in the other two Red Dead games. From shooting outlaws to taking part in bar fights or riding stagecoaches, this game really does have it all. However, due to its age, the execution of all of this is very poor and could have been done way better, which if you played either Red Dead 1 or 2, then you know that it is. If I could sum up this gameplay, it's that the vision is there, but its execution and design needed some improving. The story for Red Dead Revolver is actually better than I expected. You start out as young Red Harlow, and after completing the tutorial, your home is attacked by unknown enemies, and they kill your entire family. From here we escape and fast forward to when he's an adult, and this is when the real story starts. At first it seems like it completely deviates from what happened in the beginning, as many of the early missions you complete are just bounties and killing outlaws. What this game did a good job of was introducing other characters within these missions that become your allies when everything comes together. As I mentioned before, you'll complete missions with these characters, giving you more of a personal connection with said character instead of just adding them in through the cutscenes. However, when things come together, it all happens pretty fast. One second you're just in town fulfilling bounties, stacking up money, and then the next thing you know you're chasing down the people who murdered your family. I think the pacing for this could have been a bit better as the story is told within the missions, but there's many times I found myself wondering why I was doing what I was doing. It kind of felt like we were completing missions to justify the introduction of the character, but the mission itself didn't provide too much substance in regards to the story. It's like the story just had us doing things with other characters, but it didn't actually move anything forward. Even with the limited amount of screen time, our small cast of allies are all pretty memorable. They're not that fleshed out, but for some reason their different personalities shine and offer a great counter to what Red provides when he's on screen. Since Red is a man of few words and is more of the strong silent type, having characters with opposite personalities makes the cast feel more relatable and unique. The entire atmosphere of the western scene was done really well, as the town and townspeople all appear exactly how you would expect. I loved their accents and how the city was designed because the stores were all small and cramped, just showing that you really were back in the 1800s.
Say, you're new in town, ain't you, stranger? You ought to have a look around and see the sights while you's here.
Entering the sheriff's office or going to the saloon all felt natural, like it should have just been there. Rockstar nailed the western aesthetic, and it only heightened the events that occurred throughout the story. By the time the story ends, everything is resolved and Red cements himself as one of the most badass cowboys to ever live. For a game that was made in the early 2000s, its story left a lasting memory in my mind for sure. If there was one thing I would have liked, it would have been that the story for this game was tied directly to Red Dead 1 and 2, but considering when this game was made, I get why that wasn't possible. Overall, Red Dead Revolver is a game with a lot of good things and a lot of bad things. Most of my issues with the game stem from its age and how the game actually functions. What you do within the missions is fun, but the combat is missing some things that would balance it out and make it a bit more fair. Nonetheless, this game sets the stage for the other Red Dead games to come and created as good of a foundation as you can make. For those reasons, I'm going to give this game a 6.5. Red Dead Revolver isn't a bad game, but it's not good. In both the combat and story, there's things that you'll like and things you won't. But for a first attempt at a cowboy game, I think Rockstar did the best they could, and I would say that this game is definitely worth one playthrough. Just one though. After you play this, uninstall it and never play it again. If you played Red Dead Revolver, what did you think about the game? Let me know in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed this video or are a fan of other Rockstar games, feel free to check out my Bully review right here.